Initially, we're here to update ourselves first on how the subcommittees are going. I think we're making some decent progress. I think at least half of us have met, and we have our series of questions available for the department heads when we meet with them. I think that's very good progress. We still, I think, have 4 or 5 more subcommittees that will be meeting one another. My recommendation, however, is to keep the subcommittees very pointed and private, at least in the initial phases of our question accumulation. There'll be plenty of time for citizens to have input into our discussions and to voice their opinions as we work through the analysis for the different budgets. So my suggestion is to keep things as in-house as possible until we get to the point where we're able to have reasoned discussions with the department heads in the proper forum.
Question on that.
Yes, Maggie.
I know that we're supposed to be an independent board.
Yes.
So we don't have a citizen speak like the selectmen. Correct me if I'm wrong. And remember last year they all came up, and remember when Chairperson Conlon was upset even when the fire department showed their support. She said, and she spoke to us and said, we're an independent board when it can't be swayed by popularity or what other people think. We're not supposed to be having a citizen speak unless they're invited on a particular matter.
Yes.
That's what I think, and if anyone thinks differently, please feel free to tell me.
That's how,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's certainly been my understanding.
Absolutely,
That we are kind of apart from the politics of everything. We're supposed to be an
Yeah.
impartial,
Yeah.
analytic group that is
Just the
able to.
facts.
You're right. It's the Joe Friday approach, just the facts.
Yeah.
Now, the position and point of view of people concerned is obviously part of what we need to consider. I think those opinions are factors in the decision making. But as we're accumulating our approach, and as we're looking at the analysis, I suggest we try to be as objective and as empirical as we can initially, and then put the gloss on, if you will, get the color as we work through this. There's time to do it, and I think just generally speaking, it will make for a more transparent decision-making process, which I think is in everybody's interest, certainly in the town's interest, as we
When we're
go
working with
forward.
such a short period of time.
Right.
And that's another consideration. We certainly don't want to be giving short shrift, and we don't want
Right.
to be ignoring anybody's point of view. But we want to be very careful that we are making sure that we're looking at the numbers for the numbers' sake.
And the
Because
open
that's
meeting law
effective.
requires an agenda. An
agenda,
So
yes.
if they're not on the agenda, you can't do what's not on the agenda.
That's quite right. Right. So I think we have to just be mindful of this. So that's
Yeah.
just my reminder to all of you as we go through this, which is one reason why, as we have our subcommittee meetings here, it's all on the agenda, it's all in the open, and theoretically, we've got, not theoretically, actually, we are following what's prescribed. So,
Just, it's maybe clarification or something, but it might go without saying, but of course, we would welcome the public to attend, to be better
No.
informed, but not
Not
participate.
they can
Not
attend,
participate,
certainly.
certainly attend to
Yes,
be.
of course. I mean, we're
Yes,
we're
anyone
televised,
can come,
so,
yes.
Just
we're
to-
televised, so it's...
Just to make it
exactly
abundantly
right.
clear.
Yes,
You're welcome
exactly
to
right.
attend, but
Yeah.
they're not on the agenda to
Yeah,
speak
it's a
and
public meeting,
participate.
so anybody can
Yes,
attend.
exactly.
Yeah,
Obviously.
exactly right. But in
And,
terms of
it
participation...
basically,
As well as
it's
the
just like any other
subcommittees.
committee, nobody has the right to speak without the chair's.
It's totally your call.
Yes,
It's your
you have to
control.
recognize even us, technically
Yeah.
speaking,
It's very difficult not to recognize all of you.
at this point.
I'd also just like to point out that citizens do have the opportunity to speak to any warrant article that's
They
out
do.
there.
That's right.
During
Absolutely.
town meeting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Every item that becomes a warrant
Right.
item can be spoken to by the public if they get on the agenda. So-
Yes, that's
That's
exactly
right.
right. So there's ample time, which is why I say let's focus on precisely what our responsibility is, and that's getting to the nitty-gritty as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I do want to remind us, we do have a meeting on Wednesday evening this week, and one of the agenda, I'm sending the agenda out, it's been authorized, but I'll send it out after, it's been posted, I should say. I'll send it out to everybody individually a little bit later. One of the things we're going to talk about is the non-budget warrants. So those have been sent to you electronically, and I think a few of you have actually printed them out. But if you want to bring hard copy, that's fine, but they have been printed. We'll just go through them perfunctorily to see how much time we need to allocate to them as we go through this. The priority, obviously, right now is to get through the budget in anticipation of having the department heads come in to speak to us. So just a little bit of forewarning that we will look at those on Wednesday. So from that perspective, that concludes my remarks, and I would be very happy to have any input from anyone, if there's anything that we have, any housekeeping things that we have to attend to before we invite the town administrator and the town accountant to come for the presentation. None being, Maggie, yes.
Oh, no. I just got a letter from our moderator regarding the open meeting, public meetings, because I had asked him about it. And he said that he read through the open meeting law, and that a minority, meaning if we have subcommittees, they may meet without triggering the open meeting law. Someone else told me that as well, so that means we don't have to post our subcommittee meetings.
I disagree. I disagree with
That is
that.
not the advice I've gotten.
Yeah, I just totally disagree.
I
with
can
that.
I did not-
understand.
Wholeheartedly disagree with
I
that.
Only
will-
disagree.
I didn't get that
I will forward to
information.
you what Bob sent to me, to everyone.
I would think in the abundance
They're
of
all- they're-
caution, we should publish.
It's a
I would agree with that until, I have not gotten a clarification from the town council yet. So in the meanwhile, I expect to have that. In the meanwhile, I still suggest we post the subcommittees, just to protect the process, as most of you have done. So I think that just to be safe.
And then at the end, he says for the safe side, post
Right,
it,
quite.
because people may actually file a lawsuit.
Right, and we can't, we
Right.
certainly don't want to put anybody in that position. So my suggestion is to follow process.
I just want you, if you can discuss emailing, the question I sent you this afternoon.
Emails should be, I don't believe all emails, if they're perfunctory emails about process, they are not covered by public meeting. If you're talking about substantive issues that are dealing with the actual budget and the issues, yes, that is something that we have to be very careful of. So my
Just because, I'm going to be the chair of
Yes.
three very small departments,
Yes.
and those questions could be answered over email, and I just want to avoid, I want to get some sort of clarification,
Yeah.
whether it's okay to do that, or do we actually have to meet
I
face-to-face?
would do it in the proper format,
Okay.
in proper form, just to be safe, because
Sure.
chances are it's harmless, but again, we don't want to run into the case where we would be running foul of the prescribed format.
Yeah, it's no, if you want to put out, as a chair of the subcommittee, put out an email to all your members saying, forward any questions to me, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you don't then get into a discussion about.
Right.
Mine was more asking the department the question and getting a response from the department and sharing that, not actually having a conversation with the other subcommittee
Send
members.
4 or
It's-
5 separate emails instead of one. So forward to one member, forward to another member, forward to another
that all?
member.
But that's
If you
probably
want it-
okay.
if you
You're
want
not
to
having a
avoid-
discussion.
Yeah, I would think that would be
You're
okay.
just disseminating information.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not an
Getting,
exchange.
getting
I
answers
think
to
I
questions.
think the court's trying to figure out now if circular emails like that count as
boy.
deliberations.
Yeah,
but it's still
well, when
a
they
little-
come up with the
But
answer,
then
we'll be
it's
all
not
ears.
clear that, so at the moment, just one to each other should be
I think
all right.
that's perfectly fine, as long as it's kept in that format. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm pleased to welcome Mike and Amy, Mike Dennehy and Amy Dexter, for the presentation of the capital budget. Mike, thank you, by the way, for all of the alerts about when the revenue figures are going to be coming in. Apparently, you had a decent meeting on Saturday just before you began.
Yeah, we did. Actually, it was Friday. The governor attended the Mass Municipal Association annual conference on Friday. Very good news from where we stand. Town accountant does a very good job of conservatively estimating where local aid is going to come in. Local aid is roughly 10% of the revenue for the town, so to miss that number is crucial. So hats off to the town accountant. She usually pegs it back 2 notches. The governor's good news on Friday, and he's going to file the bill on the 24th, I believe, after his State of the Commonwealth address, was that the unrestricted local aid is going to increase 3.5% this year. We did some quick math today, myself and the town accountant. That's about $112,000 more than last year, which is great. Additionally, we spoke with Assistant Superintendent Glenn Pavlicek and Superintendent Gormley today. Chapter 70 money is also going to go up. There's an algorithm that only those school people understand, but Glenn translated it to be about $80,000 more
Every little bit.
for the students in Milton in the school budget. So the one shortfall, if you will, I was hoping, fingers crossed, that it be an election year, that potentially we could see our Chapter 90 money spike to $300 million, which is what the governor awarded in his first year in office. Normally, it's $200 million. He did reveal that this year it's going to be $200 million. So Milton will get their portion of that, which is a little over $623,000.
That's Chapter 90 money.
Chapter 90 money for much-needed roadway and infrastructure work there, so very good news. We're plugging in the numbers. Amy's going to send a spreadsheet around
Right.
very soon so that we can work on the balancing portion of it. We've scheduled a meeting for Wednesday with the school department to go over where we think they need to be.
And we're planning to have you come for that on the 29th?
Could we come on the 31st? I have a board
31st,
meeting on
Wednesday,
the
the
29th.
31st?
Yeah.
Yes, we're scheduled to have a meeting, but yeah, we'll put you on the agenda.
Yeah,
for
so
that.
we will get that in your hands and the committee's hands very quickly.
That's great,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, pretty good story so far.
Yeah.
We like where it's heading.
Makes everybody's job easier.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're interested to hear the capital program.
Great, yeah, thank you. And this year was a new approach. So last year there was transition and capital improvement committee. Let me back up. A lot of the compliments I'm getting on the street from people recently is a lot of stuff that was funded previously through the capital improvement committee and is now literally, coming to fruition, hitting the streets, if you will. There's a lot of public works equipment that was fought for by that committee many years before I got here that's now on the road. So I want to thank members of the previous committees because we're reaping the benefits of it now. So this year's process started with Amy and I meeting with all the departments, and then what I presented on behalf of everyone to the Capital Improvement Committee. We have the two co-chairs right here. Tom was your committee's representative. Just the wealth of information from that group, it's astounding. And the process that took place was very thorough. They started by looking at, let's see what people asked for last year, and if they didn't get it, why didn't they ask for it this year? So they were actually combing through things. Yes, things do pop up that weren't on last year's agenda that, have become a quick priority, but I think for the most part, that committee was happy with people not, bait and switch type thing where you really needed something and then you didn't get it and now it's fallen off the radar. So pretty thorough process with the department heads. I'm very happy with the recommendations that the committee made. It's approximately $3.5 million, almost $3.6 million in bonded capital items and another $1.4 million in non-bonded capital items. We can go through the list. I presented it to my board 2 weeks ago. We didn't necessarily go through each item. We gave a general overview as to the process and what we did. I think the only thing that was asked for by the departments was the roadway. Previous DPW director and current DPW director both agree that in order to catch up on the infrastructure in this town, you'd need a little over $3.5 million. It's just the state of our roads and the state of repair and the lack of funding for it. So that was scaled back to $1 million. But very happy with the way things came. All departments got generally what they were asking for. It's very well spread out. We talk about, touching all parts of our town agencies, and I think we did that well, and the Capital Improvement Committee should be commended for that. But if you want to go down through this list quickly.
The bigger items, I think, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we-
Okay, you can do that, I just have
Yeah.
a question. We can wait to the end if
Yeah.
you're gonna go through the big hitters or.
Well, yeah, it's a good idea, Tom. Why don't we go through the big hitters, and
Yeah.
and Amy, jump in at any time because Amy was integral in getting this process upstairs in the Cronin room down to this room here with the Capital Improvement Committee, which met 4 or 5 times very early in the morning. So, again, I can't thank the Capital Improvement Committee enough for their diligence on it. And You know, they see what we need presently, and they also continue to keep those placeholders in there. And, you know, if you look at 2023, you see investments as a placeholder for the larger items in the town, you know, the firehouses, the DPW facility, just so that it's in there and we don't forget about it. So kudos to them for that. But,
Before you go through, can I just add a couple things? Just want everybody to keep in mind that at last May town meeting voted to increase the threshold for a project to be considered a capital project from 10,000 to 25,000. So you will see when you get to the operating budgets, there's a few budgets, not a lot, that have a few things in there that maybe in the past would have been considered by the capital committee. But now they're what I refer to as minor property. That would be something that's either less than $25,000 or has a useful life less than 5 years. Not a lot of stuff there, but now they need to try to figure out how to absorb those things or ask for one-time funds through the operating process.
That process was really helpful too, because what we were getting, first of all, in the past, this year we had somewhat of a manageable list, you know, 100 and some odd items on the list, as opposed to 200 and some odd items on the list in prior years. And a lot of what was winding up on that list were really repair items. They really weren't capital projects. And they kept changing all the time. It was just what broke this year, we'll throw it in. At least going from the 10 to the 25, a lot of those repair items kind of dropped off the list.
Yeah, and one other thing to keep in mind when the capital committee and when Michael and I sat down and looked at things that we do consider is there may be things that meet the definition of a capital project through the $25,000 threshold or the useful life, but when you really look at it, does it make sense to bond them? We made decisions about that, and that's how you're getting the bonded versus non-bonded. So when you look at the nature of the non-bonded items, they're usually things that are technology-based, that, yeah, they have a 5-year life, but do we really want to borrow money on that if we can fund it by other means? Or are they things for facilities that were replaced? You know, it's more of an upgrade or I want to call it a repair, but an improvement that maybe you don't want to keep bonding those things.
What's the target maturity for the bond?
It all depends on what type of equipment it is,
Right.
or what type of asset it is. So it's more of the infrastructure is somewhere
Yes.
around 20
I don't think
years.
so, 20 to 30 anyway.
Yeah, the large DPW equipment, we usually bond 15 years, and then the technology-based stuff would be 5. So if you're buying a bunch of equipment, like the personal computing devices for students at the school, yeah, it fits the definition, but let's be conservative, and that doesn't make sense to bond that, because you have children, you know.
What state
students
agency
using-
do you use?
Pardon?
What state agency is the bonding conducted through?
We use our own bonding.
Oh, do you use,
Yeah,
you
well,
don't use the Mass HEFA or anything like that?
no, there's, the only ones we do is Mass Water Resource Authority, MWRA, we do some
MWRA.
interest-free.
But we
bonding
have
for
our own
that.
bond rating, we have a AAA bond rating.
Right, and who generally underwrites?
That's more of a, I don't really know, that's more of a
I think they're
treasury
generally
function.
competitive deals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The financial
so
advisor.
we have a
Usually
bond,
financial advisor, and it's a competitive.
Unibank is our,
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Who is actually issuing them on your behalf?
yeah, Unibank is our consultant. They basically prepare
They
a
put
bid.
it out to bid, and then.
Okay,
get the
that's my
best
next set of
deal.
questions.
Yeah.
What's the competitive bidding process? And has it been revised lately? And how frequently is it put out to bid?
So those are all questions that you should speak to the
We
town
bond every 2
treasurer
years.
about.
Every 2 years?
Every time it's bonded, it's put, every bond issue
Competitive
is
bid?
put out to
Okay,
bid.
good.
Most of those bonds have recall, the ability to recall them after so many years if interest rates go down.
Yeah.
We have done that several times over the past.
It's called refunding.
Yes.
But it's the same as
And it has a call
buying.
provision where you're not going to be hung out there forever.
Generally 10 years, would be my experience.
Yeah,
So it'd be a
that's-
20-year bond with a 10-year no call.
Yeah, there's a few items that we're currently in the process of rebonding. I'll bring it to my board on the 29th. There was a list that Treasurer gave me today that he'd like to have my board take a vote on.
Yeah, in the past, unfortunately, it's tended to be more the old, the debt exclusion stuff, so it really doesn't have much of an impact on the operating budget. But
Right.
It does save the taxpayers money, clearly.
Yes, I would think so.
But by doing that.
Okay, please.
Sure, yeah, so basically, if the big ticket items, and the largest item on there needs a little bit of explanation. I think everyone's familiar with the intersection of Squantum and Adams Street. I think you take your life in your own hands sometimes when you get to that intersection, and you're trying to take a left onto Squantum, or any turn off of Squantum. So it's a dangerous intersection. In order to be ready for state funding, we need this to be approved at town meeting so that we show the state that if TIP money is available, that we're ready for it. So basically, your shovel-ready is not technically the correct term, because we wouldn't be shovel-ready because we haven't designed it yet, but it's the ability for the state to say, is this project ready in the funding, as a funding source for a TIP program or something at that level. So this is to get those funds ready. The design portion of that is probably a couple of $100,000. That would be the first step in it. And it's about signalizing that intersection with left turn phases for people. It's just a dangerous intersection.
Depending on the time of day. But that would be the 7th traffic light between the Neponset River and Adams Street in East Milton Square.
And it would be tied into that signalization, which stops at St. Agatha's, right?
Yep.
So that would be timed in. Actually, I went down with Jack Calabro, our signalization representative from DPW, last week, and he showed me how it works. It needs a little bit of improvement, and that's part of the East Milton Deck project. But that light, if it should get there, would be part of that whole signalization.
So they'd coordinate all of that.
Coordinate it all. Yeah.
And what is required in terms of consultants to do the validation of this sort of thing? Is that included in the 200,000?
Yes, yep. So that's just to be ready.
Right.
That's money, that was advice April Lamoureux gave us and from the Capital Improvement Committee, and she's worked on these projects before, and the state tends to look away from projects that don't have town meeting approval for funding, so.
And can I have something about that? That's approved, we're looking for approval from town meeting for fiscal 19, but the cash flow will not be all in fiscal 19. It will be in a year or two out, but the capital committee's trying to look at the big picture and not, this was originally submitted to the committee as the design piece, and then the construction piece later, and that's where April's expertise comes in, where she deals with these agencies, and she's like, if we approve the full project, doesn't mean we have to spend it all at once, but that gives us a leg up on trying to secure state funding, probably not all of it, but a portion of it, and we're trying to look at things that way so that we're not just relying on bonding the money or free cash. We need to be more proactive about those types of situations. So that would not be bonded this August. It would be an out year.
So this 1.1 million is the approval amount, not necessarily the appropriation amount. It's based off of total cost, like a ballpark estimate of what the project would cost. It could be less, I mean, some grants or appropriation from the state.
Yes.
Oh.
Right, the bonded stuff is a bond authorization, so it's an authorization to bond, and then obviously spend, but the debt service is the part that gets in the operating budget, not.
Please continue.
Yep. The roadway construction, that's level funded. That's, if you will, from capital perspective. That's normally what they generate, that committee generates for roads. I don't have a list on me. Town engineer comes back from vacation tomorrow. I will get that list for you. That's usually the next question people ask is, what streets are next? There is a priority list. They're actually seeking the services of a consulting firm to do a general audit of the town and scale all of the roads from, I don't know if they go from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, and prioritize that list accordingly. But he does have a pretty thorough list, and I'm sure that $1 million, I think back in Boston, we used to do about probably 3 miles of roadway for $1 million. So I don't know how comparative the prices are here. We are part of a consortium bid, which does bring the prices down a little bit, but we'll see what we get for $1 million. But he does have a list of that stuff.
The
and I will get
the
that.
one thing that's new on here in terms of the DPW projects that is a good idea, even though it's not large in dollars, is specifically setting aside money for sidewalk
Right.
paving and improvements. I mean, all you got to do is walk some of the sidewalks to know the condition of them, so.
Yeah, and that piece of equipment that goes with it, the $32,000 sidewalk paver.
Right, so
if
we'll
you-
be doing a lot of our own projects in terms of sidewalks.
It's just a smaller paver that handles the sidewalks. Some of the sidewalks are heaved from trees, other are just in disrepair from age, but with so many modes of travel around town, it's important that our sidewalks are as maintained as well as our roadways. And then collectively, I think you can look at the DPW equipment. A lot of that stuff was very old equipment. And again, I'll go back to where I started tonight. A lot of the praise we're getting is for the new piece of equipment that are on the road. You know, it's a lot cheaper to put a warm union body in that truck than it is to hire a contractor. They know the streets better. They tend to care a little more. Not that contractors don't do a good job, but I think the investment in equipment was addressed years ago by the Capital Improvement Committee, and I appreciate it going forward. Largest school ticket item is the roof replacement at Tucker. And that's an estimate. Bill Ritchie says that when you know, in the roofing industry, you don't know what's in there until you pull that thing apart and find out what's underneath it, so. But that roof needs to be replaced. It's the oldest of the roofs in the school system, so. Very confident, and Bill sits on the committee as well, so
Yep.
it's a nice voice to have on the committee. Bill's very thorough with all the construction stuff. Just working, kind of bouncing around on the basketball court down the bottom where they have spring basketball. I'm sure there were kids out there today playing. If you've been down there, it's dangerous. There's some heaves there's cracks, and it's not getting any better for those two basketball courts down there. So they are going to fix the water drainage down there as well. It came in a little bit lower last year. The increase in that allotment was they're going to fix the drainage down while they have the area milled and overlaid. For the non-bonded capital items, we've talked about the recycling carts. That's the big one over there. Anything in particular that catches anyone's attention, or any questions, or?
My question was, that assumes free cash to pay for that, so is that list, is there a priority list? 'Cause
Right.
there's not enough free
That's
cash.
right.
Yeah, there's,
That one?
Okay.
So, under the new strong TA legislation, Michael and I worked very closely on the operating budget piece as well as the capital piece. So I had the benefit of working with him, looking at the town operating budget requests and what they were asking for free cash. So when the capital committee was trying to determine where we could fall with the non-bonded, we took that into consideration. So this $1,415,000, there's one other thing that should be mentioned, this lower level floor replacement in the main library for $85,000 the plan is, that is not free cash. That will use the library construction fund. There's some excess monies in there. I've already verified with the financial analyst that we did an analysis that was donations and not bonded money, which means the library construction committee can authorize the library to spend it on other things for the main library. So that's the plan there. So that comes down to $1,330,000 combined with what we've identified in the operating request as one-time money, comes out $44 less than total free cash. So I tried to balance it already,
say so.
based upon what we knew were in both. So when I went to the capital committee, I knew where we landed so far. And that part could change.
Schools too?
Yep, yep.
The one item on here for those viewing at home is trees, right? We made a commitment, I made a commitment last year to reinvest. The Shade Tree Advisory Committee has done great work walking the town. We're losing 100 trees a year, right? So there is money in our operating budget, I believe it's $20,000. There's $43,000 here, one-time money. That would do a good few trees for the town. That was the commitment that I made. It's something I think that the town needs to rededicate itself to, the attrition level of the trees, the street trees that we have. Any other particular items that catch your eye, or?
I guess, the recycling, if you said, you talked about that. I mean, I'm kind of new to
Okay.
sort of the town providing the recycling carts. I think I try to lock mine down on my street, but in any
Yeah.
event, so the town provides the recycling bins?
No, they'd like to.
Or they'd like to?
Yeah, we'd like to give a...
These are the big pull-
The big 64-gallon lidded wheeled recycle carts.
Yeah.
They'll be stamped with the Town of Milton logo, they'll be RFD tagged, and we'll deliver them to everyone's home. With the idea that, you know, we're trying to incentivize recycling, make it a little more convenient. Single-stream recycling takes place in Milton, so you don't have to separate things. Everything that's recyclable can go in that one bin. And the idea is to promote that by increasing the 25-gallon unlidded bin to this big one that you can store more. And
Yeah, and do you think is there a reimbursement in terms of, you know, with the waste company?
yeah, so what
So-
what happens is currently we pay $78 per ton to get rid of trash. We pay $17 to get rid of recycling. So that delta there is what we would try to maximize for our return on investment. Will we ever get that $400,000 back? Probably not, because that's a lot of tons that, you basically have to take everything and tip it upside down. We have about a 40% recycling diversion rate in our town. We'd love to see that number up 60, 70%. That's where you can really save money for the taxpayers by not spending $78 per ton, but, yeah.
Maggie, did you have a
Great,
question?
I think the recycling carts are a great idea. I don't know about anyone else, but we just went for an override, and spending $400,000 on bins, I don't know how that's gonna sit too well with people, but wouldn't it be less expensive? I have my own full-time barrel, and I have an old stick-on that says, you know, recycling that the town used to provide that you stick on, you know. Wouldn't it be easier just to provide the stick-on so people put it on their large barrels?
We have that ability. There are stickers that people
Yes.
can buy. We just haven't seen the buy-in.
Well, why don't we give them to them instead of recycling bins?
Yeah, I mean, this proved in Boston where recycling is about 22%. There's a lot of owner-unoccupied, there's a lot of, you know, tenants and college students that, you know, don't recycle or won't recycle, or, you know, I don't want to put certain people in a box, but we saw improvement when we gave carts out to people. People really take the initiative. They literally, they love that cart, and when they went missing, you know, they're like, I want another cart, where's my cart? And we had people subscribe and get 2 or 3 carts. I have 2 64-gallon carts at my house, and I put out 1 bag of trash every week. Most of the stuff is recycling, but what I see as I drive around the town is heaving 25-gallon bins like the one in this room, and that blows around, and it creates a mess, and then people stop, right? If they can't put any more in, they're just gonna throw it away. So it's kind of a catch-22, Maggie, but we succeeded.
Chuck?
How you gonna hand them out?
Company delivers them,
Company will deliver to every
Yeah.
house?
every house, 2 weeks,
Every house is eligible?
2 weeks, yep,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
People,
I don't know, I think people might like it.
but they may say they didn't get it. Who's gonna say if they just hand them out?
I'm sure this.
No, there's an RFT, there's an RIFD tag, and it's,
And I've seen it in other communities and on trash day, and it's almost like a pride and ownership.
Yes,
of
yeah.
doing so, and then some pride in the town is that this is, you know, we care enough about the, you know, climate science, et cetera, and that we've made this investment. Just was curious about the return on it.
return, yeah. I mean, at that $60 delta, you can do the math, right? Each cart, you know, we priced them out, the 400,000 is for 8,000 carts, so it's just under $50 a cart. You'd have to recycle, swap that ton out to pay for your cart over time.
I'm like, will they do one man on a truck on these things, or use the arm to?
Yeah, so the current contract, the Sunriser Scavenger, tends to have one person on the truck. They probably won't do the one-armed bandit. It's something that they could try. I've seen it in communities that have gone to this, where the driver doesn't even have to leave the vehicle. He just hits a button and up it goes. If there's corrugated cardboard outside of the box, or outside of the bin that they have to get, that's something they jump out for. But the industry's heading that way. I could check with that contract. We have about a year left on that contract, so. In a community like Milton where there is off-street parking, it makes sense. In Boston where there's, you know, bumper-to-bumper traffic that create more damage than they solve. Yeah.
Doug?
Is the trash collection, non-recycling, going to get significantly more expensive?
So
To make this
that's the
even
question,
more
right?
attractive?
In July of this year, we received a letter from our disposal site that they effectively terminated their contract within 30 days, which they were allowed to. The town's allowed to, they're too. They did. So we had to renegotiate that price. I reached out to 2 other disposal facilities in the community. They gave me a better price, but then operationally, our hauler said, that's going to cost me more to do that. So in the end, we went back to the company. We were paying $70 a ton. They went up $8 on us, just because they could. And a lot of them, the other 2 facilities wouldn't quote me a price over a year out because they just don't know what's going on in the industry.
It's an expensive town, it's
Yeah.
not like increasing this is more attractive.
Right.
But if you recycle,
Yeah.
you're in that 15, 20 ballpark, and that's not going too far away, so.
Meg, do you have a
So
question?
just two things. So that means, is the regular trash barrel still gonna remain like at 30 gallons? That's number one. And number two is, does it cost more money to recycle? I was under that assumption that the cost to recycle costs more than the regular trash.
No, our tipping fees are currently like
Same?
$17, yeah.
No, it's much cheaper to recycle.
Scott, did you have a question?
And the barrels will, the trash barrel would stay the same. We're trying to incentivize more in that blue barrel.
And I agree that the per trash to haul it off is cheaper. When you talked about the one-armed bandit, is there any negotiating room that's gonna be created with these larger recycling carts with the contractor? Meaning they're gonna have to, that one person's gonna have to pick up X amount of barrels less.
Right.
Is their labor gonna be cut, and are we gonna see any benefit from that by implementing?
That's a good question that we'll talk about. I'm reconvening the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I asked the chair if someone from this committee would join that with us with 15, 16 months left in the current contract. But yeah, that's definitely a question that needs to be asked. Very good question. That's a 9-person committee, made up a couple of public works.
How often do they meet, Mike?
Oh, we'll probably meet 3 or 4 times, probably every other month till we get something.
Can we interrupt? Does anybody have an interest, since we're on the subject?
Who's not here tonight?
I was just making a notation when I was looking at the attendance. I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
It's trash and recycling, it's pretty interesting. It really is. I mean,
But it-
we received more calls on the Thursday when it snowed because we had to send the trash trucks home. They were getting stuck than we did for snow and ice control, believe it or not. It's,
Why not? If anybody has an interest, please send me a note, and
Yeah.
we'll put you in touch.
No, it is interesting, I agree with them. Not right now, Bill. I wonder if they have anyone that checks the barrels. I know people don't follow all those recycling, and they throw trash in them, I know that.
yeah, the
for a
facility
fact.
lets us know. The facility has, what they call a residuals rate,
So
which
do you
is...
have any people, checkers, that work for the town that can go around and randomly check barrels?
So usually, the contractor does that. If you see an orange sticker on your barrel, it's rejected because, you may have trash in there, you may have something that's not supposed to be in there. Or if it's a trash and you didn't buy a sticker, then, we have to follow the rules, so. Do we have enough people doing it? No, we don't, no. It's
Joe, just before we leave the topic, just a couple of words about the process in terms of, what the capital committee, what we do and what we're striving towards. First of all, the charge is to create a 5-year capital plan. We've struggled with that mightily over the years because of the fact that the departments tend to put in things, and then the next year, it's just a whole new set of things. So it was getting impossible just to get a capital plan that was consistent. When you get to years 2, 3, and 4, everything kept changing. So we're striving to get to that point. I think we're better. I think with Mike, kind of pulling everything together and coordinating everything, that's going to be a little easier to do. The other thing is, we have a giant spreadsheet that basically we load in everything. It will calculate if we can make decisions. Do we want to bond this item? Do we not want to bond it? Depending upon what our decisions are, useful life, it'll bring it onto a bond schedule. It'll calculate the debt service. It'll bring it back to a summary sheet. We can see, originally when we started this thing, we were striving to keep debt service to 1.9% of the tax levy. So that sheet kind of estimates the tax levy as it goes out over the 5 years, bringing it up with the 2.5%, factoring in a new growth rate year after year. And this year, the committee really believes that, commitment to capital is important. If we don't commit to it, then we wind up, with these giant, massive jobs that, winds up in debt exclusions. So we believe that, something around 4% commitment to capital a year, 4% of the operating budget is probably a reasonable number based upon what other communities do. We're not close to that at this point. We tend to use our one-time money, but if the one-time money isn't there, then there's nothing to spend capital on. Other communities, it comes out of the operating budget. There's a 4% commitment out of the, or 5% in Arlington's case. This year, we pushed up the debt service from the 1.9% to 2.5% in our model. And we have factored in going across the years, an overall commitment of about 4%. And I think we hit that. We hit about, 3.8% or something like that overall?
The average was 3.7 over the 5 years.
Yeah, okay. So, so we kind of hit that in our plan. This year, we're funding, what's not bonded is being funded by one-time money. But you can't always rely on one-time money. I think a little bit of it has to eventually get
Yeah.
into the operating budget.
I think, though, that you are beginning to approach a subject that, and I'm not quite sure who would actually oversee this discussion and in whose parameter, to whose purview this would fall, but I think you have to look at, okay, if we're going to increase the spending to the point where we're going to approach that 4 to 5%, how sacred is the AAA rating, and at what point does that threshold, is that violated where you would go from AAA to AA? And secondly, do we really care, given the differential between AAA and AA in the current market for municipal bonds is 15 basis points?
Well, first of all, commitment to capital expenditures is a plus point, not a negative point on.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm just
On the
talking
bond
about the
rating.
practical aspects of it.
So from a practical standpoint, that's a plus point on your bond rating, not a minus. Basically, we shouldn't, based upon our numbers, we shouldn't be a AAA community. We're a AAA community because of our ability to get overrides passed. And basically our conservative revenue estimates, our reserves are nowhere close to where they should be. They kind of look at the fact that our reserves are building. That's helpful. And basically our commitment to planning is what gets us there. But if you looked at the straight numbers, we wouldn't be AAA.
So how do you change that, Tom? What do you do?
What we're doing, is just a slow commitment to, changing things around. It would be nice not to have to spend 100% of your free cash every year, to be able to, put it in reserves. At this point, we can't. But, so that's kind of the philosophy which we're gonna be working on, with the selectmen over a period of time to maybe create more policy statements, with respect to things like that.
And right now, they're not formal, they're not written, so we can be more flexible, but once they're, if they ever are, adopted and formalized, then we have to do it, so. Right now, it's just metrics and targets that we think are reasonable for the planning process.
Okay.
I have a really basic, simple question that may come from some folks at home. These capital requests come from the actual departments.
Correct.
Where is the citizens plug into these particular items? Who is taking a look in the community to say, we're missing X, we're missing Y, we're missing Z in this community. You know, review or rewind the clock several years, and we didn't have some of the playgrounds in the community that we currently do have, because people took it on themselves to make that happen. Who in the town is responsible for taking a step back out of the departmental realm and saying, all right, what are the capital needs of our community, not just what is being driven by department heads? Just kind of an overall look at that.
So I think that falls on my shoulders.
Okay.
Right? And I will take a lot of pride in the trees, right? Trees were something I talked about earlier tonight, and it's a commitment that I made, but last year, the $112,000 that went to the playground planners for that's great, and I agree, we do need community input. Most of this stuff, because last year was a transition, came from the department heads and was already in these plans, and it was stuff that was almost funded last year or in the pipeline for 2019, but I think that's a great discussion to have. There are ideas out there that we haven't tapped into. A lot of our department heads are in tune with their departments, but again, you know, playground planners' work is a great example of how this committee helped fund that project that basically was grassroots and didn't come from the department.
Right.
Yeah.
If I can just add something as a member of the capital committee, we take with the departments, not just the department heads, but the separate boards and committees. And a lot of those areas that those things would fall under, parks, cemetery, library, do not fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen, therefore not under the town administrator. We've been lucky historically that for the most part we have really good communication and cooperation, but if it doesn't come from the parks commissioners to the capital committee, I can't just put it on there because someone told me they want me to put it on there. So my suggestion would be to somebody out there in the community that wanted something to be considered would be to contact those boards, committees. Some of them are elected, parks, cemeteries, they're elected, library, or Michael, and then he can work with them, but for the park piece, as an example, the committee in last year was kind of confused what to do with that, because it was in a citizens article, we got it through the selectmen, but it wasn't on the initial submission that the capital committee got from that board. So just wanted to put that out there, that of course that would be the first place that someone would start, is to start attending those meetings of that board and getting some public input through their meetings, and then maybe to the selectmen also, so that we're not kind of put in the middle of it as a capital committee. Right now, what do I do? I hear that this is out there, but I really can't. Otherwise, I'd be flooded with, the committee would, not I, the committee would be flooded with these requests that aren't really formal.
And I agree. You know, it's important that along the process, and especially for someone's new, when you look around the table, there's a lot of new faces, to understand how folks who want to be involved or want to have some influence in what happens to the town, what are the avenues to make that happen? And I think answering that question was helpful.
I'm going to chime in too, and just kind of echoing what Amy said. It does take place at the various boards and committees. And those people, for the most part, those elected boards, the library trustees, certainly are attuned to what the public wants. I mean, that's what they do. And they want to hear public feedback. They want to do programs to benefit the public. The parks the same way. The park commissioners they're all residents, and they all listen to their constituents. And, so it's in their interest, really, to bring those programs that the people want. And I think that's truly what they attempt to do. It's the capital committee's job to kind of, with limited resources, to vet those various capital requests, if you can't fill them all, and decide which ones are most important. And sometimes that is painful, and it's a process. And I think what we try and do is first look at health and safety issues, those we get first priority, and then it comes down the road from there.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Jean?
Yeah, this is in connection with what you were talking about, your pet project trees. The cemetery, this is not my question really, this is Steve's, we're on the same committee. But I noticed in his list of questions, because the cemetery needs a lot of trees, but like your point, so don't there are other needs for trees also, but the cemetery, of course, is not under the Board of Selectmen, so it kind of gets, they have a large budget for trees. The question Steve wanted answered was, should someone look at enough space in the town where trees could be planted? You could have a small nursery that that seems like what you're talking about, a worthy project for citizens to get involved in. Is that possible?
Yeah, so Joe Prondak, who's the building commissioner, brought it to me. He thought it was a novel idea.
Good idea.
You start with kindergarten or first grade students.
Yeah.
And we need the land to do it, but the student would nurse that tree to, let's say, through elementary school.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to my board and haven't spoken to Milton Public Schools about it yet, but they basically nurture that tree, and I've said this before, you imagine driving through the town 30 years later and pointing to that tree and said, that's my tree, that's the tree I nursed, right? So it starts with an acorn, but Joe Prondak upstairs brought that idea to me and said, if trees are going for $150, $200 a tree,
Yes.
why don't we have some of our school kids take advantage of it? So I haven't had that conversation with the school department yet, but I did present his idea to my board about a month ago. So
We had, at our Rotary Club, we had an Eagle Scout present his project, and it had to do with revitalizing a school with he did a beautiful new gate, and they put in new trees, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And talking about getting a project going, if we can use the Eagle Scouts as well, get our needs out there, because we are so blessed in Milton to have the scouting groups that we have. They have really done a lot of wonderful projects in the town. So I think, I think they should be tapped as well when we have these issues, because Milton is, that is a really important part of our environment. So that's all. So I'm very happy to hear
Yeah.
about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
you and Joe Prondak think alike.
Yes.
Just on this point, because I've had personal experience with it, I taught in Washington DC public schools, and they were part of a program where Japan would actually gift cherry trees, and so our school was gifted. There might be other types of programs where you can get, and they supplied the labor to come and actually plant the trees. So if there's grants like that, it's another, just because it's your pet project.
Very good. Thank you.
A lot of times, the Boy Scouts and the Eagle Scout program especially gets a lot of donations, so it costs them very little to complete their projects. And
The Girl Scouts would do that too, because they have a gold award, which is similar to the
Yes,
Eagle
that's
Scout.
right.
In fact, in some cases, even more rigorous than the Eagle Scouts.
Yeah.
If you talk to the
Yeah.
Girl Scouts, they would say that.
Yeah.
But I think if we mobilize both of them, because they're both very active in town, it might
that
not be a
would be
bad thing.
wonderful. And also, we had a senator one time that got us I think it was a $50,000 grant for trees. So, I mean, and there are lots
lot
of,
of ways.
yeah, there's a lot of routes that we can follow.
That Shade Tree Advisory Group that I talk about, they're very active. They received a $3,500 grant last year,
Yeah.
which will plant,
Great.
almost 10 trees. They're very active in searching in that grant world and getting Milton to be, Tree City USA. And
As the pollution gets worse, the trees will
No
fail.
other questions? Thank you very much, Mike, Amy.
We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thank you. We'll
Thank you.
be happy to
Thank
see you
you.
then.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Okay, next item on the agenda is our subcommittee updates. As far as I can tell, either scheduled or already have met, include the schools, public safety, capital, pensions and insurance, DPW is scheduled,
We met.
oh, you met already, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
okay. The Parks Rec Council on Aging, has that met or is it being scheduled?
I would hope to do it Wednesday.
Okay, Wednesday. Cemetery, you're done.
Thursday,
Okay, and library,
it's done.
it's done already. Boards, committees, the Appeals, Conservation, Historic, Warrant, Panel, Personnel. Has that committee met yet? That's Tom, Doug, and Chris.
I don't think we are.
No.
That one needs, yeah, that one we need to schedule. And then General Government, which is Brian, Chris, and Tom. Has that one met?
We were going to meet with one of these meetings, but we don't have a committee here tonight, so.
Okay, so
Wednesday,
whenever.
hopefully, if they're here.
Yeah, I would think, Wednesday, we have another meeting, by the way, this coming Wednesday. I believe we need it to go over the non-budget warrants, just to get jump-started. Okay, so if those can be scheduled, we will be in very good shape that's the fourth and fifth item on the agenda together. And then the calendar for our budget completion, we are obliged to invite the large groups. The schools have been in, capital's already done. Those of you who want to invite your department heads in, please at the next meeting, have that proposal ready, and then we can schedule them in the next couple of weeks. I would like to have this done as quickly as possible, so that we can get down to the nitty-gritties of looking at the budget as the revenue numbers come in 10 days or so. So that will make it, I think, a lot easier on us as we approach February. Do we have a need for subcommittee breakouts this evening? If most of them have met and you're going to schedule the last 2 or 3, it seems to me that we probably are okay not having breakouts.
I guess
tonight.
boards and committees could meet. I really haven't looked at the budgets very much, but I'll still be willing to meet if you want to.
I was just gonna say, this could be under new business, but I'll say, so, school committee, the subcommittee for schools is planning to attend the subcommittee of the school finance committee a week from today.
Right.
I would really, anybody who has questions, please send them to me. I'm gonna send them to Glenn. I'd like to send them Thursday.
In advance, so he can
In
have a chance.
advance,
Yes,
I
good
don't expect him
idea.
to answer them, but at least they'll have
See 'em,
them.
yeah,
and
and be
we'll
prepared.
be ready to have a discussion. So if you could get me the questions the end of this week, much appreciated.
Okay. Okay, is there going to be a breakout? If there is,
It's up to you guys. I mean,
Yeah, yes,
Sure.
we should.
okay, if that's the case, you can do the breakout, and we'll just recess before we adjourn, because we can't end the meeting until the subcommittee
Okay,
finishes.
all right.
So we are in recess. Those of us who are here can stay, or, I mean, we need to have
Just
still
mill around.
8 people to maintain our quorum, but we are in recess until the breakout finishes.
Okay.
I figured that maybe.
Yeah.